Hey everybody, MorbTron here. So fusion rifles are getting adjusted just like shotguns and snipers are going into Season 10 next week. The only difference is I think fusion rifles might be getting hit a little bit too hard to the point where they might see a lot less usage than they do now, and fusion rifles really aren't used all that much currently. Sure, the exotics are, and air intel is used, but not as often as snipers or shotguns. So I'm worried, and it kind of reminds me of way back in Destiny 1 when Bungie nerfed auto rifles into the ground because one auto rifle, the Suros regime, which coincidentally is getting a buff going into next season, but they nerfed every auto rifle into the ground, and auto rifles in general were pretty much useless until the end of Destiny 1 when they finally got a little bit of a buff again. And I'm afraid that might be happening to fusion rifles going into Season 10. And the reason why I say that is because every single fusion rifle is getting an effective range nerf going into next season. And people might be saying, yes, air intel needs a range nerf. That is actually false. The reason why air intel is so overpowered is actually not because of its range, but because of its damage fall off is not what it should be. And you're saying to yourself, range and damage fall off are the same. They're actually not. The way that damage fall off currently works in the game is that there is a damage fall off floor, meaning that once the damage drops to a certain number, it cannot go any lower. So as an example, let's say a weapon does 100 damage. Once you hit, say, 0.75, which is what a fusion rifle's damage fall off floor is currently, so you'll be doing 75 damage versus 100, it cannot go any lower. Couple that with fusion rifles having 7 fusion bolts that come out per fire, and air intel has a perfect storm of perks and traits that can work together to land 6 to 7 fusion bolts at any distance, and the damage fall off being 0.75 lets you do 36 damage per bolt as shown here. 36 times 7, well, that's 252. That is enough to get a kill at infinite range, because 36 is as low as it will go. And you can even get a kill with less than 7 landing. 6 landing is still more than 200. So that is getting changed, which is the reason why air intel is overpowered. Now, should you be able to land 6 to 7 fusion bolts at infinite range? No. But the reason why air intel can do that is also really not getting changed at all. So air intel being a high impact fusion rifle, if you're standing still, you get a boost to stability and accuracy. Granted, that makes you a sitting target, so it's a little bit hard to pull this off. But if you also have firmly planted, which if you're crouching, you get an increase to stability and accuracy, which is almost exponential. Firmly planted is actually an incredibly powerful trait, and if you get a weapon with it on there, you'll notice a night and day difference between standing and crouching with how accurate and how accurate and stable the weapon is. Couple that with having a stability masterwork, a stability battery, something maybe like tap the trigger, which also increases stability and accuracy, and you have the perfect storm to have an incredibly accurate fusion rifle. Couple that with how the optics work in Destiny 2. Now, a weapon in real life, if you have iron sights on it, a red dot, or a long zoom scope, that's not going to change how accurate the weapon itself is. It might change how accurate the person firing the weapon is, but not the weapon itself. If the weapon is pointed at a thing, it's going to hit the thing if it's pointed there, barring other outside factors, but that's not the point. So the way that the weapon optics currently work in Destiny 2 is that if you have a long zoom scope versus a red dot or an iron sight, you will actually have better weapon accuracy with that long zoom scope. Doesn't really make sense, but that's how the game's coded. So that's another thing that's getting changed across the board for fusion rifles. So effective range and the impact of the optics stat for every fusion rifle archetype has been reduced or will be reduced across the board. So we have a backup plan nerf, which needed to happen because backup plan was a exotic trait back in Destiny 1, And Bungie thought it was a good idea to have all fusion rifles have backup plan in Destiny 2 starting out because they were all heavy weapons. And that was fine, that wasn't that overpowered. It made them very potent, but not overpowered, because you had to pick up heavy ammo for that to happen. But now that they're not heavy ammo weapons anymore, that probably should have been changed, but they left the trait in the pool, and so you can just panic, pull out a fusion rifle, and map somebody if you're good enough. Which needs to be changed, and is being changed. Backup plan is getting nerfed to the point where it's basically going to be useless going in next season, because the fastest you'll be able to fire off a fusion rifle is 0.85 seconds, and that's with backup plan. That's pretty terrible. So backup plan is going to be pretty useless. Now personally, I don't care. I don't like backup plan. I like to pre-fire my fusion rifles anyway, and backup plan doesn't really allow that, because it's damn near instantaneous. But that'll be changed going into next season. So what needed to happen for Erentil to not be broken levels of overpowered is, maybe a trait needed to be removed from the weapon. Maybe firmly planted needed to go away. That's really, without firmly planted, you cannot land 6 to 7 fusion bolts. So if they would have just removed that one perk, you would not be able to literally map people. Now, my current Erentil, which I'll pull up on screen right now, it has snapshot sights, tap the trigger, a range masterwork, a stability battery, and a long zoom scope. And you saw there earlier on when I was trying to hit a target at a super far range, well beyond hitting the damage fall off floor, I could only hit 2, and that was the best. I tried like 30 times. Still, that was probably a little much, but the farthest I can consistently get a kill, if I could speak words that made sense, is generally about, I think, 28 to 30 meters, which might be a little much considering, what it is, but both me and my target have to be sitting still for that to happen. It's basically, what would happen in a perfect scenario. I'd have to have perfect recoil control to make that happen. So, a role like mine isn't really going to be affected all that much by this nerf. It is a little bit. The effective range is getting hit, which will make a difference a little bit now that the damage fall off floor is going to be 0.5 versus 0.75, and the weapon optics are going to make it a little bit less accurate. So that's going to hurt fusion rifles more than just hitting Erentil specifically. So we'll have to see, because Bungie again did not give us any specific stats for how much they're reducing the range and how much they're reducing the effective optics. But fusion rifles do have one thing going for them. They're getting the same bullet magnetism or target acquisition buff that shotguns are getting. So whenever Bungie uses the magical words target acquisition, that means bullet magnetism, where the game tries to pull your projectile towards your target's head in the Crucible. So currently, even though fusion rifles cannot do critical hit damage, the game will still try to pull your fusion volley up towards your target's head, which is a smaller target than a target's torso, so it'll actually cause some fusion bolts to just flat out miss, and that's not cool. So the way that it's getting changed, just like shotguns, is that target acquisition, bullet magnetism, is going to pull your fusion volley towards center mass, now towards the torso, which will make the weapons more consistent, but won't actually give them any other benefit other than that. You just won't see fusion bolts just veering off into space when you aimed at somebody's torso. So that's one thing they have going for them, but I'm really worried about this effective range and impact of the optic stat note that Bungie had in their patch notes, when they don't give any specific values for that. It leaves a lot of gray area, and I'm very worried that fusion rifles in general will be used even less than they are now. Really, the only ones you see now being used are things like Jotun, Bastion sometimes, but Bastion is barely even a fusion rifle, and Erentil. And if if Bungie is going to do what they say they're going to do here, that's not going to change. It's just going to hurt every fusion rifle across the board regardless. And if we reduce the range on Bastion any more than it already is, it's going to be completely useless. It might as well just call it a shotgun at that point. So we'll see. We'll have to see what happens. I'll make a follow-up video to this, of course, when Season 10 actually starts. But if you like this video, hit the like button for me. I would greatly appreciate it. If you're new here, subscribe, all that stuff. But don't forget to have a good day, everybody, and I will catch you all next time.